Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into one of the most fiercely debated, just absolutely fascinating topics in human history. We're talking about the ultimate showdown, free will versus biological determinism. Are we actually conscious agents charting our own course, or are we just incredibly complex biological robots playing out a script written by our genes, our upbringing, and our environment? Well, we're going to break down some groundbreaking frameworks that try to bridge this gap. We'll see how modern neuroscience, physics, and philosophy are actually coming together to suggest that, hey, maybe our sense of agency isn't an illusion after all. Let's dive in.
So this is the fundamental question, right? Are you actually making any choices? To understand the newest answers to this, we actually need to rewind all the way back to the autumn of 1820. Picture this. A physicist named Hans Christian Ørsted is giving a lecture, running an electric current through a simple copper wire. And suddenly, he notices a nearby compass needle just twitch. He reverses the current, and boom, the needle swings the other way. Now, what's truly wild about Ørsted's setup is that there was absolutely nothing physical connecting that wire to the compass. He had discovered electromagnetism, which proves something massive. Things can act on the world without actually touching it. The space around an object, it's not just empty void. It has an organized, powerful structure, a field. Now hold on to that concept of the field, because it is literally about to change everything we know about the human brain.
Section 1. The Invisible Force. How Ancient Philosophy and Magnets Explain Human Action. 2,400 years before Ørsted made that compass twitch, the ancient Greek philosopher Thales of Miletus was holding a magnetic lodestone in his hand, and he declared that the magnet had a psyche, a soul. Now, he didn't mean like a ghost. He meant it quite literally and functionally. To Thales, the magnet possessed the actual capacity to initiate motion in the world without being moved first. It could literally reach across empty space and just make things happen. Now, for centuries, science kind of laughed this off as a charming, pre-scientific myth. But as you'll see, Thales' idea of the psyche acting as this invisible field of force might actually be incredibly accurate when we apply it to the human mind. But before we get to the mind as a field, we kind of have to face the music. Section 2. The Illusion of Choice, the terrifying scientific case for hard determinism. Over the last few decades, a really confident camp of biologists and neuroscientists, folks like Robert Sapolsky, have built this terrifyingly strong case for hard determinism. Basically, they argue that you are essentially just biological clockwork. By the time you think you're making a decision, well, your neurons have already been decided by their prior states. And those states? Decided by your hormones, your genes, your evolutionary history, the whole shebang. In this view, there's no free agent inside of you. It's really just a massive chain of dominoes falling. And the timeline of a decision brilliantly illustrates exactly why these determinists are so confident. Way back in 1983, researcher Benjamin Libet found that a readiness potential popped up in the brain's motor cortex about 350 milliseconds before a person consciously decided to move. Fast forward to 2008, neuroscientist John Dylan Haynes used fMRI scans to predict which button a volunteer would press up to 10 full seconds before the person was consciously aware of their choice. 10 seconds. That is an absolute eternity in brain time. The really unsettling takeaway here is that your brain physically prepares to act long before your conscious mind decides anything. It kind of makes consciousness look like a mere press secretary, right? Just stepping up to the podium to announce decisions the biological machinery has already made behind closed doors. So, is that it? Are we all just passengers along for the ride? Well, not necessarily. Let's move to Section 3. The field is the mind. Why looking at individual neurons misses the music? See, the problem with those fMRI and Libet experiments is what they're actually measuring. They're tracking individual, discrete neural populations. But searching for consciousness by tracking individual neurons, it's a lot like pointing a camera at individual seats in a concert hall to try and find the music. You can see the musicians shifting around in their chairs, sure, but you completely miss the symphony, because the music isn't located in any single seat.
And this brings us to a really revolutionary framework proposed by molecular biologist John Joe McFadden. It's called CMI theory, or Conscious Electromagnetic Information Theory. The core idea here is incredibly elegant. Those billions of neurons firing in your brain, they aren't just sending chemical signals. They're actually generating a massive, unified electromagnetic field that extends across your entire brain. McFadden proposes that this field isn't just some byproduct or like the exhaust fumes of your brain working. No, this field is consciousness. Your conscious experience exists right there at this integrated macro level.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point here is what this field actually does, because it isn't passive. It features what physicists call downward causation. Basically, this means a higher order pattern, in this case the electromagnetic field of your consciousness, feeds back down to exert a causal influence on the lower order components, which are the individual neurons. It literally nudges the probability of which neurons will fire next. So when we look back at Libet's 10-second delay with this in mind, it completely changes the picture. That delay isn't your brain deciding without you. It's the early preparation of the neural populations. It's literally the orchestra tuning up. The conscious decision is simply the moment that integrated field finally resolves, and the full symphony finds its chord.
We can actually see this difference super clearly when we compare a chess engine to a human grandmaster. Think about it. The chess engine operates in a totally deterministic universe driven by raw physics and math. It calculates numbers. It searches decision trees. But the human grandmaster, she evaluates meaning. She reads the story of the board. Sure, her individual neurons are obeying physics. Of course they are. But as an integrated whole, she is responding to a semantic reality, a higher order, emergent meaning, like sensing danger, plotting a sacrifice, or shifting strategy. Physics provides the canvas, for sure, but the integrated field of the conscious mind makes the actual choices about what gets painted. To truly understand how this field works, and importantly, how it breaks, we need to look at a famous, pretty visceral piece of medical history. Section 4, the smashed magnet, Phineas Gage and the structure of human agency. So back in 1848, there was this 25-year-old railway foreman named Phineas Gage. He was working with blasting powder when it unexpectedly detonated. An iron rod, literally 3 feet long and weighing over 13 pounds, was blown cleanly right through his frontal skull. And remarkably, incredibly, he physically survived. But, as the famous quote from his friends and family goes, he was no longer Gage. The man who survived that accident had lost his emotional steadiness, his reliability, his impulse control. Hard determinists love to point to Phineas Gage. They argue this proves the self is nothing more than hardware. Their logic is, if you smash the frontal lobe, you destroy the person. Therefore, there is no self apart from the arrangement of those cells. But if we look at this through the lens of physics and fields, there is a totally different, way more fascinating interpretation. Let's look at this through the analogy of a smashed permanent magnet. If you take a hammer and just smash a magnet, the iron atoms are still there, right? But you've disordered their alignment. Their atomic domains scatter into randomness, and that macroscopic magnetic field just completely collapses. And that is exactly what happened to Phineas Gage. The iron rod didn't destroy his base cognitive components. I mean, his memories and language were totally intact, but it scattered his cognitive alignment. His intentional field collapsed. But here's the crucial part. A disordered magnet can actually be remagnetized. You just stroke it repeatedly in one direction to align those domains and rebuild the field. In humans, we call this neuroplasticity. We can rebuild and realign our own brains through deliberate practice, therapy, and intentionally overriding our impulses. Agency isn't some ghost in the machine. It's a structural property. It can be damaged, yes, but it can also be consciously rebuilt. Which brings us to Section 5, the wetness of choice. How genuine causal power emerges from microscopic parts. So, we've talked a lot about fields and downward causation, but this all rests on a massive concept in science known as emergence. If you're not familiar, emergence is what happens when a whole system develops completely different properties than its individual microscopic components. Think about it like this. A single, isolated water molecule has absolutely no capacity to be wet. Wetness only emerges when billions of those molecules interact. The exact same goes for temperature, or the flocking murmuration of starlings wheeling across the sky, or even life itself. I mean, no single atom is alive. The determinist vastly underestimates that these emergent properties have genuine causal power. Wetness causes you to slip on the floor. Life causes organisms to actively seek food. And free will? It operates exactly the same way. It's an emergent property of your integrated brain field, and it exerts genuine, top-down causal power over your physical body. And we actually have clinical proof that you need this entire unified field to make a real choice. Take Antonio Damasio's famous patient, Elliot. Elliot had a brain tumor removed, and while his IQ and his memory were perfectly intact afterwards, the connection between his reasoning and his emotional circuits was severed. The result? He literally couldn't make simple decisions. He'd spend an hour just trying to pick a restaurant for lunch, totally trapped in endless calculation. Eliot's story proves that true deliberation is not just a math problem. It requires the emotional inputs of a unified field. We have to evaluate who we want to be and what actually matters to us. Algorithms just compute data. Only agents truly evaluate. So, where exactly does this leave the determinists? Let's get into Section 6, Reclaiming Your Agency, the fatal contradiction of hard determinism. It turns out there is a pretty massive, fatal contradiction right at the very heart of the hard determinist argument. Think about it. Robert Sapolsky wrote a massive, brilliant book to convince people that free will doesn't exist. He argues that we should reform our justice system and extend compassion to everyone, specifically because no one actually has a choice in what they do. But writing a book to advocate for compassion implicitly assumes that the audience consists of free agents capable of being persuaded by reason. I mean, if we were all just falling dominoes, a logical argument wouldn't matter at all. You can't write a book to change minds if you don't secretly believe minds can genuinely choose to be changed. The reality is that the brain is a self-modifying recursive system. When you use your conscious field to override a bad impulse today, you physically rebuild the neural substrate that will generate tomorrow's field. You are literally an author writing the biological software that you're going to run on. The causal chain of your life isn't just a straight, predetermined line, it's a loop, shaped directly by your previous choices. Which brings us to our final question for you. Are your domains aligned? The science of emergence and electromagnetic fields suggests that free will is not some magical automatic gift you get just for waking up in the morning. It is a physical structure. It's something you build through the deliberate and honestly sometimes exhausting daily practice of alignment. Do your values, your attention, and your actions all point in the exact same direction? The universe provides the deterministic canvas, yes, but the unified, aligned mind, that directs the brush. Thanks for exploring this explainer with me today. Now, go make some choices.